It's Math Tuesday. One of the things we do in the 2023 summer edition of Dave Campbell's Texas Football is a piece by longtime managing editor and longtime contributor David Barron down there at the Houston Chronicle. He's been doing this for years, where it's a 5-year recruiting review, where 5 years after a class was signed, he goes back and takes a look at how that class panned out and how maybe our perceptions were wrong, how close we were to on the evaluation side. And he actually, I hope when you pick up the magazine, you will go and read the whole thing. It's very interesting, but he has a whole formula. There's a whole formula for grading these that's not just how many games you won, but it's how many players got drafted. It's how many academic All-Americans you had, things like that, conference championships. It's a big formula that he puts together where he re-ranks the classes. It's a really interesting piece, and I always enjoy whenever it comes in. It came in after the NFL draft because we had to wait for the draft to go by. Mm-hmm. And so this is an opportunity, I think, to take a look at the recruiting classes from 2018, which was 5 years ago, and how those recruiting classes really panned out. Now, if you remember, and maybe you do, maybe you don't, but the way that those recruiting classes really broke down was that let me see if I can find this. The top recruiting class belonged to, I want to say, Texas A&M. Let me see. It belonged to Texas, I should say. It belonged to Texas. The next best belonged to Texas A&M. And these were two, oh wait, no, who had the number one? Actually it was Texas, followed by A&M, followed by TCU.
Okay. Texas A&M, TCU. Those were the top three recruiting classes. Okay.
And now I believe there's been coaching changes at all 12 of the FBS teams since then. For example, Tom Herman signed the Texas class. Mm-hmm. It was Matt Rule who signed the Baylor class. Sonny Dykes signed the SMU class. Gary Patterson signed the TCU class. Seth Luttrell signed the North Texas class. Major Applewhite signed the Houston class.
Cool.
Right. Frank Wilson signed the UTSA class. Jimbo Fisher did sign the A&M class. So that was his first class. Cliff Kingsbury signed the Texas Tech class. That's 2 coaches ago. Mike Bloomgren did sign the Rice class. He was there. Dana Dimmel, he was there as well at Texas Tech. Everett Withers,
Dana
they're on their third
UTEP.
coach. Everett Withers signed the class at Texas State, and so on. But when you take a look at these, it's really interesting to break down how these went, how these classes particularly kind of broke down. You got some classes that underachieved, some classes that overachieved, and others that kind of stayed about the same. So what I want to start with, and I think I numbered these. Did I number these?
Yes.
Okay. The first one I want to take a look at is starting seasons. So what we did, took the number of high school signees that each FBS team had in the class of 2018, and then the number of seasons that those players started, okay? That they were starting, members of the starting lineup for those teams. And then we come up with the average. So, for example, Baylor, 21 signees from the high school ranks, 25 starting seasons, 1.2 starting seasons per signee. So, the number one team on this list, believe it or not, the team that got the most starting seasons out of their players, the North Texas Mean Green.
How about that?
2.1 starting seasons per signee. Now, they only signed 13, but they got 27 starting seasons out of them. Same goes for SMU. SMU had a great class in that regard. They got 2 starting seasons for every signee that they had. Now, obviously, if you have one guy who starts 3 seasons and another guy who starts 1, that averages out to 2. But still, next up on that list was Texas, 1.5. UTEP, TCU, UTSA, all kind of hovering around 1.5. Baylor, Texas Tech, and Houston at 1.2. Rice at 1 got about 1 starting season out of each of them. And then you have the 2 programs or the 2 classes that I would say disappointed here. One of them was Texas State. They signed 24 high school kids. They only got 19 starting seasons out of them. And then there's Texas A&M, which signed 21 players. Remember, they are the second-rated recruiting class. They got just a little more than half a starting season out of each of their 21 signees. It just didn't work out for them. There are reasons why that we'll get into in a moment, but I do think that that's really interesting that they just plain and simple did not get the bang for their buck. So then that's one way. That's kind of what kind of value you got for them on the field. What about putting them into the NFL? Which teams did the best job of taking their class of 2018 and getting them drafted in the NFL? And maybe this is a surprise, maybe it's not, but the winner here is Texas. Texas put 22% of their signees into the NFL draft. 6 of their 27 got drafted. TCU's next, 15% of them with 3 out of their 20. Then Baylor, 14.3. Then Houston. Then Texas A&M, 2 out of their 21. SMU, Texas Tech, and UTSA each had one with kind of varying degrees, around 6 to 7% of their signing class. And then there were 4 teams that did not get a draftee out of their 2018 class: North Texas, Rice, Texas State, and UTEP. I don't know if that's necessarily a huge surprise, but in the end, Texas did the best job of recruiting draft players that would end up to go on to be drafted, followed by TCU and Baylor would be the top 3. But this is the one that I wanted to get to, because this, to me, is the one that tells you about how the game has changed in the recruiting world during the course of the lifespan of this 2018 class since they've been on campus. Let's talk about transfers. Let's talk about which teams lost the most and the least to transfers. So the team that held on to the largest number of their signees was UTSA. They signed 17 high school signees, and only 3 of them transferred. That's pretty good. Only 18%. Rice, also kind of not surprisingly, held on to 27, or only had 27% of their signees transfer. Baylor's next at about a third of them. Same with SMU, about a third of their players. North Texas, a little under 40%. Texas State, under around 41%. Then you get into teams that had more than half of their 2018 class transfer. Texas Tech had 52 and almost 53% of their signing class that transferred. I don't know if that's necessarily a huge surprise, considering they had 3 coaches in that span.
Yeah.
Right? So let's just say you got signed by Cliff Kingsbury. Matt Wells comes in, you might be like, I don't want to play for Matt Wells. Matt Wells gets fired. Even if you hang on with Matt Wells, they're like, oh, well, I don't want to play for Joey McGuire. Right. You know what I mean? There's opportunities. There's exit ramps there. TCU, maybe a little bit of the same. Sonny Dykes comes in. They lose 55% of their class. Same with Houston. They had Major Applewhite, then on to, and then eventually they brought in, after Major Applewhite, it was Dana Holgerson as a coach now. 55%. They had a coaching change. Texas had a coaching change. 55.6% of their class transferred. UTEP didn't. But I also wonder if that is a part of that is that they did have kind of success under them. And so as a result, when you're a G5 program like that, you get plucked. We know that there have been a number of guys who got transferred to other places because they just got other opportunities to play at bigger programs. But the outlier here is A&M. They had the same coach, Jimbo Fisher, still there. They signed 21 high school players. 2/3 of them transferred. 14. They had of the 21 signees they had, only 7 finished their career at A&M. Only 7.
Yeah, it's really odd to look at it because, like we mentioned, obviously, like UTSA and North Texas and Rice, when those players that are drafted there, I think that we can start to talk about the difference between Power 5 and G5. Those players are excited for the opportunity to get to go play there, and then it shows that UTEP, when you have success, people pluck you. On the opposite side of this to me seems like the real hitter for high school players that are drafted by these huge Power 5 universities of saying, okay, hey, I'm not going to get any playing time here. I thought maybe I could redshirt my freshman year and then go do something. So they decide to transfer over to a UTSA where the retention rate is a lot higher.
Right. So look, I hope you'll pick up the 2023 summer edition of Dave Campbell's Texas Football. I will tell you that based on David Barron's formula, which again takes into account a lot of these factors plus more, Texas did end up with the number 1 class, followed by Baylor which had a really nice, which ended up having a number of, like a couple of All-Americans, like Connor Galvin, etc. Then it was SMU was third, TCU was fourth, North Texas was fifth, Houston was sixth, UTSA was seventh. It's eighth before you get to A&M, which was the number 2 class coming out when it got signed.
It doesn't surprise me about SMU being so high because you'll remember, obviously, they brought in then Shane Buechele, and then that 2019 season was when things really started to take a turn for them.
So the thing about them that ended up helping with them was Jalen Thomas, who was a 5-year starter for them in the offensive line. Reggie Roberson counts as a transfer, but they had 6 guys who were on their 2022 roster from that class.
Yep.
I mean, think about that. 5 years later, they had 6 guys still on that class out of 14 high school guys. It was a good class there for Sonny Dykes there at SMU, and Rhett Lashley's done a great job with them as well. Anyway, that's a look at the 5-year recruiting review that we're going to have in the 2023 summer edition of Dave Campbell's Texas Football, which we hope you will go to texasfootball.com/subscribe to get your copy mailed to you early. That is Math Tuesday.
Math Tuesday.